uh, Wonderful. Before I call the meeting to order, I know that for the meeting to order. So welcome to the February 16th meeting of the Ann Arbor Renters Commission. The purpose of the Renters Commission is to advise the City Council and the City Administrator in matters affecting renters in the City of Ann Arbor. The Renters Commission is made up of voting members who are appointed by the Mayor and approved by City Council, 2 non-voting City Council liaisons, 1 non-voting liaison to Housing and Human Services Advisory Board, 2 non-voting members representing different landlord perspectives, and a non-voting representative from the University of Michigan Student Legal Services. To speak during any one of the public comment opportunities, you will be able to speak through the webinar link, or if you're calling by phone. For the phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 935-8080-1941. To be called on to speak, callers must press *9 if they're listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if they're viewing it through the Zoom web link. You will then be called upon by city staff one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by your username on Zoom. You will hear an automatic announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. So please state your name after that, and you can begin speaking. City staff will indicate when you have only about 30 seconds left of your 3-minute comment period. After 3 minutes, you'll be placed on mute and we'll go to the next speaker. Okay, so wonderful. Now we'll move on to roll call. Because this is an electronic meeting, please include the city and state you're attending the meeting from. I think if you're in Ann Arbor, we know what state you're in, but we'll start through the roll call. So I am here, I'm calling in from Ann Arbor. Commissioner Chen.
Yes, I'm here. I'm calling from Ann Arbor.
Great, welcome. Commissioner Peterson.
Hi, everybody, calling from Ann Arbor.
Welcome. Commissioner McCurgy.
Hi, I'm calling in from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Kelly. Commissioner Cohen-Smith.
Here, calling in from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Rumel.
Here and calling in from beautiful downtown Ann Arbor.
Welcome. I knew I recognized your law office. Commissioner Droppelman.
Here and calling from Ann Arbor.
Wonderful. And if I mispronounce anyone's name, please let me know. I don't want to keep mispronouncing it. Commissioner Else.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lowe's.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Tibbetts.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Rosen.
I'm here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Redina.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Welcome. Councilmember Harrison.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Wonderful. And I know we also have Jen Cornell here with us. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm here in Ann Arbor.
Right. Wonderful. And our city staff present, Kristen. Great. Welcome. And John Reiser, our city attorney's office attorney. So great. Yeah, so I know we have 2, is it just 1 new person who's never introduced themselves? So I guess we should all introduce ourselves briefly. That's all right. So, right. I guess Commissioner Lowe's, did I call on you during the roll call? I'm sorry if I skipped your name.
Yes, you did.
Okay, wonderful. So I'd like to give you the opportunity and give everyone the opportunity to introduce themselves. So go ahead, Jeff.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Lowe's. This is my first meeting. I apologize. I was not able to make my actual first meeting, which was the January one. I had a commitment that was made far prior to me being appointed to the commission. So I appreciate your indulgence in that. I live in the South Ann Arbor area in an apartment near Stone School in Ellsworth. And I'm just really glad to be here to be part of this commission. I think it's really important, especially in a city like ours. And I look forward to working with all of you.
Welcome, Jeff. And you go by Jeff or Jeffrey?
Either one is fine.
Okay, wonderful. I can start and we'll go down the list. My name is Zachariah. I'm the current chair of the commission. I work for Michigan Medicine and Research. And I'm also a renter and have rented in the city from a few different landlords. And I'm very grateful to be here. So I will pass it off to Dun.
Yeah, I'm Dan Chen. I am also a renter in the downtown of the Avalon Housing Community members. And I'm extremely lucky, one, to be here in the city and in the and especially a member of the Avalon Housing Community. That really makes me my life so much better. I enjoyed it to the fullest. So I'm very happy and thank you, everybody. I'm the one that I should learn a lot. So please excuse me, pardon me if I'm a little bit slow. Thank you.
Not at all. We're so happy to have you, Dun.
Thank you.
Okay. Lucy.
Hey, Jeff. Welcome to the commission. Really glad to have you here. I'm Lucy. I'm a PhD student at the University of Michigan, vice chair of this commission.
Wonderful. And Richa.
Hi, Jeff. It's nice to meet you. I work at the School of Public Health at the university.
And Hannah.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Hannah. I use she, her pronouns. I am a law student. I'm in my second out of 3 years, and I'm a renter here.
Thanks. Nick.
Hi, Jeff and everybody else. I'm Nick Rummel. I'm a civil rights attorney. I practice housing law extensively in Detroit for legal services at the beginning of my legal career, and then at Student Legal Services for many years, practicing a lot of housing law in Ann Arbor. And I'm pleased to meet you and be a member of the commission with you and everybody else.
Awesome. Robert.
Hi, I am one of the two landlord advisors. I am a small landlord. I was also a renter for I think 7 or 8 years in Ann Arbor, and I also work for Michigan Medicine. So pleased to meet all of you.
Oh, very interesting. Which department?
Information assurance.
That's right. I think you did mention that last time. Actually. Okay. Jordan.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm the other landlord position. I've rented as recently as 2015 in Ann Arbor and moved here in grad school. I am nurse practitioner by degree, but haven't worked in that field for a little while because it wasn't family friendly and we just couldn't make it work. So I'm home with my husband. I do a little bit of work for our business, a lot of volunteering in the schools with racial equity and doing a lot of work with PTOs. And I'm really glad to meet you, Jeff. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Jamie.
Hi, Jeff. I am also a new renters commissioner. I'm a MSW student, Master of Social Work, and new to the Ann Arbor area. Nice to meet you.
Gail.
Hi, nice to meet you. I am an attorney with Student Legal Services. I'm a housing attorney there, and I am the liaison between the U of M and here.
Wonderful. And our council members, Travis, would you like to start?
Sure. And Jeff and I know each other already, but I am Travis Rodina, council member from Ward 3, former renter and happily a liaison here on the commission.
Great. Cynthia?
Hi, I'm Cynthia Harrison. I am council member in Ward 1, former renter some years ago, but happy to be here with you all tonight.
Thank you
Nice
for
to meet
being here. Yeah. And Jen, go ahead if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
I'm an interloper this evening. I'm Jen Cornell, and I represent Ward 5, and I'm here to talk about an agenda item this evening. But I appreciate you hosting and allowing me to join the group for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Okay, did we get everybody for the roll call and introductions? Okay. Nobody. Oh, I guess John, you didn't. If you'd like to introduce yourself, of course, you can have the opportunity to do so.
Hi, folks. My name is John Reiser. I'm one of the assistant city attorneys that have the pleasure of working for Adeline Carr.
Wonderful. And Kristen, too. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'll say hi too. Welcome, and please always feel free to reach out if you have any questions or can't attend a meeting or anything like that. Definitely reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay. Now we can move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Our current agenda.
Motion.
Motion by Lucy. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Kristen. Do you prefer if I announce it with the last names? Is that easier for you?
Either is fine.
Okay. I'll just use first names then. Seconded by Hannah. Thank you. Okay. All those in favor say yay.
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 All those opposed say nay. Okay. With that, the agenda is approved unanimously. And then we'll move on to the approval of the last meeting's minutes. So we have the minutes from our last meeting, which was on January 19th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from last time?
Also move.
Thank you, Nick. Okay. Moved by Nick. Do we have a second for that motion?
Seconded.
Second by Jeff. Thanks. All right. All those in favor say yay.
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 All those opposed say nay. With that, it is approved unanimously. So our last meeting's minutes are approved. Okay. Now this brings us to our first general public comments. I'll let Kristen, if you'd like to lead this, I'll pass it over to you.
Sure. There will be another public comment at the end of the meeting. So after this one, public comment will be 3 minutes per speaker and can be made by phone, like Zachariah read earlier, at by calling 877-853-5247 and entering meeting ID 935-8080-1941, or by joining the web link, and that is at a2gov.org/renters commission meeting. Attendees who have called in should press *9 to raise their hand. And if you're attending through the web link, you can use the raise hand feature. So if anyone would like to address the Renters Commission, you can go ahead and raise your hand now. We'll wait just a moment in case anyone's calling in. All right, so we have no callers and no attendees have indicated. Again, there will be another opportunity to address the Renters Commission near the end of this meeting.
Thank you very much, Kristen. So with that, we move on to point of business number 6. So 6-A is the presentation of a proposed amendment related to carbon monoxide detection and detectors. So on the agenda, there's an attachment, which is I think a draft amendment to the housing code, to specifically section 8.527. And I'd like to invite Councilmember Cornell to present that amendment, if you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you so much. I apologize for the tardiness in getting it to you. I'll just hit the high notes for anyone who hasn't had a chance to. I'll give a little bit of background and then hit the high notes for anyone who hasn't had a chance to review it yet. But the state of, and John, Mr. Reiser, please correct me if I mischaracterize anything. But the state of Michigan does have a law that requires any new rental multifamily units to have new construction to have carbon monoxide detectors. However, that law does not cover existing units. And so the goal and purpose of this is to fill that gap here in Ann Arbor. We know that our housing inventory is not new, predominantly not new. And so requiring carbon monoxide detectors in those units is just a basic safety feature in my mind. And so if you haven't had a chance to look at it, this would amend Chapter 101 of the Housing Code. Mr. Reiser did work to make sure that the rental housing supervisor at the city and the fire marshal both had input, and we could gain their support for moving forward with this as written. The big thing is that carbon monoxide detectors in dwelling units that contain a fuel-fired appliance, so only certain appliances would generate CO, or have an attached garage with a common door that is shared between the dwelling unit, would be required, and that the type of carbon monoxide detector as well as the location of it would be determined by the International Fire Code, so falling in line with standards that are already existing. And then I think the other big thing that we talked about and had questions around was that the owner of the unit would have responsibility for assuring that the detectors and devices are in good operating conditions. This is in line with the same as what they would have to do, building owners would have to do, or unit owners would have to do with, again, the smoke and fire detection devices within the unit. But that residents would be responsible for informing the landlord outside of a transition of lease and whatnot, if the device becomes inoperative. So starts beeping, call your landlord, they can provide batteries or service or whatever to make sure that it is in good working order. And again, that responsibility does lie with the owner. This would cause a civil infraction punishable by a fine of not more than $500, but I think that that's significant to point out, and that this is not just something that we're throwing out there, but something that would have a little bit of teeth to it. So I don't feel as though I'm mischaracterizing what the city's legal team sort of relayed to me, but this is definitely in keeping with what we do with smoke detectors right now and how the city code and how we operate now. So I'm happy to answer any questions, although I'm sure Mr. Reiser would be probably more comfortable answering himself. But I'm happy to answer anything. And the impetus was that renters did reach out to me after there was an incident with a carbon monoxide death, and just asked what the provisions and safety our laws were, and what were the rules around safety or regarding CO detectors, excuse me. And I did a little bit of digging to figure out that we didn't have a provision here locally regarding existing units. So happy to answer any questions. And again, grateful for your time to receive input from this group tonight.
That was perfect. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and display the amendment on the screen, and we'll go through the questions, if that's all right.
Sure.
Okay. Here we go. And just let me know if you want me to zoom out or whatever. Okay, I saw Dandan's hand first, so go ahead.
My question is there any time frames for the equipment to be installed? And except this one, is there any possible that poisonous air or something like that, not healthy air, that could be given up from the buildings or different kind of tools? So how to monitor those kind of things to control like the equipment like we just talked about.
So at the very end, the ordinance, this is a number that could be changed. It could be 60 days, but we have 91st day after publication. So the ordinance will be published and then we need to set an effective date. It could be 10 days, it could be 60 days, it could be 90 days. The problem is we have 52,000 residents in rental housing. And when we rolled out the sanitation supplies, people couldn't get the dispensers to put up in the bathrooms. So there could be some supply chain issues. And that's kind of why we're saying these things aren't that expensive, but we're going to need a lot of them because a big house with 3 floors could have a lot of these. I don't know, a lot is maybe an exaggeration. I don't know, 3 to 6, whatever the fire code requires. So there's going to be a pretty big run on these devices. So that's why after talking to rental housing, that date was put in there. Could be moved up, could be moved back, but that's a starting place for it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jordan?
Hi, Jenna. Thank you for doing this work, to Jen and whoever else has been working on it. So just kind of a couple thoughts that my husband had as we read through this. So we proactively did this a few months ago, just so that we kind of had an idea of how things would go. Looking at the international code, it looks like our personal placement kind of matches that, but there are some things that are unclear. So I have 4 bullet points of feedback. The first one is regarding responsibility. And so I just kind of want to throw out there that something to think about. When we say, so detectors are our number one biggest thing that we deal with as landlords. Like they are almost every time we go in a house, our maintenance staff is supposed to check, just doing a visual walkthrough. I mean, they don't check everywhere unless somebody reports an issue with one of them. But almost always at move out, we will find a large number of detectors gone, either completely thrown away or just disappeared. And this has been consistent for all of the years we've been running our business. So we tell them just to kind of give you guys background, we tell them in our addendum that there's a penalty for any missing. We tell them in our addendum that they, if it beeps, they should replace the batteries, but that we are happy to do if it is too high or they can't get it down for some reason. We tell them in our check-in document, which is just kind of a document about safety and workings in the house, and they frequently disappear. So I guess when I think about this, I kind of looked and it doesn't look like we currently have, there's not language looking at this ordinance. It doesn't look like there's specifically language about penalties. And I guess I'm just wondering, is there a mechanism? And part of this is, I see the feedback already, and I know landlords are going to push back. So I'm trying to help us come with some good things to kind of think about that. So is there a way, so for example, tenants, when they move in, they're supposed to fill out a condition and inventory sheet. Is there a way to kind of require that it's documented on there that they're in place? And then the second question is, tenants may not even know the requirements. So kind of some things to think about surrounding that. Is there some, I guess I'm mostly thinking landlords might push back on this because they're saying, I'm going to get a fee, but usually it's the renters that take these things down if they're there at move-in. So just kind of putting that out there that maybe there's a way that we can kind of collaborate with our heads together tonight to think about some ways to kind of deal with that possible barrier. Maybe including something like must notify landlord within X days of one not working, that kind of thing. And then I did hear you say, the landlord providing batteries in general, if it's regular ceiling heights and somebody just has a chair in general so that it can stop beeping that night and they can sleep, those are fairly easy to replace 9-volt batteries. But, I was curious as to, Jen, with you saying landlord replacing batteries, if we are thinking about something like that in the specifics, because they didn't see that. So that's kind of idea number 1. Idea number 2, I just think that we have a lot of different building styles in Ann Arbor, and that we really need to, maybe this is now we have developed a question for our March meeting. I think that we really need to have clarity from the building department, both in terms of we as landlords and renters as well, about exactly like where they need to be. Because even reading that code, I had some questions. So our decisions that we made around boilers are that they go, around the boiler, but of course with a boiler, there's no airflow in that house, right? So it made sense to put them in the rooms around the boiler that were sleeping rooms. But some of that with boiler systems isn't really clear to me in that international code. So I just thought that making sure that we are all on the same page so that landlords know what to expect might help some pushback. And, a lot of this, I guess, in kind of doing research, a lot of the older houses that are just draftier and have bigger gaps, of course, the risk is less. And so it feels important to kind of make sure that we've kind of covered all the different building designs and the what ifs, that there are a little bit more than this international code, because I still have a little bit of unclarity, lack of clarity about that. And then the third bullet point, compliance and the timeline, I just kind of have some questions and thoughts about that. So we did a lot of shopping at Cheapest. They were $16 a piece buying in bulk. If you manage 400 units, you could have to buy a fair amount of them. It's still a fairly small amount of money, but that may be something for pushback. So, I want tenants safe as soon as possible. Clearly, we already put them in everywhere, but I guess I'm just kind of wondering, like, there's really no, I'm just wondering if we're going to get pushback about the 90 days, because this could be like a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 expense for larger companies. So just kind of thinking about that. And then the other piece to that is, of course, these things only last 10 years. And so if we're saying you have to be compliant within 90 days, we're saying you spend that, if you say you have a large number of units, 300 to 400 units, you may be spending 6,000 or 7,000. You have to spend that now. And then it's a guarantee that you have to spend that plus inflation in 10 years. So I wonder if there's a way to kind of tier it. There is a provision in housing code where variances can be sought for kind of undue cost burden to changing something. So just kind of wondering about that, if we could, just kind of think about that. I guess I'm just kind of throwing that out there. And I'm also open to you guys saying, no, it just needs to happen. People just need to do the cost. But I do think that may be something that gets pushed back on, and that we may want to think a little bit about. And then the other thing that kind of came up, like, is there any, if we decide that we are going to stick with the 90 days, is there any money in the city or fire budget to kind of help cushion the expense, or where, a landlord could come get one for a handful of their units, something like that, just throwing that out there. And then number 4 being, how are we going to communicate this to both parties? And so, yeah, any clarifying questions on kind of what I've thrown out there, anything from anybody? I know, sorry, that's a lot of information, as you guys know I come with often, but anybody have anything?
I think the only thing that I would offer in any of your feedback was that, especially your 1.24 point was about the battery. The one thing that I was concerned about was that putting the cost of batteries and that sort of maintenance into the hands of tenants. And so when you said, yeah, absolutely, could you push a button and get rid of it, or could you like go to Target on State Street and get a 9-volt and come back, like that, I think serves one population. But for people for whom I think could potentially put them at a disadvantage financially, but looking at it from just an equality standpoint, assuming that like a $10 battery or whatever is not much to anyone, is not, I want to make sure that people are safe regardless. And so I wanted to point that out, that was something that I had asked Mr. Reiser about specifically. But ultimately the responsibility for the maintenance should go with the person who owns that unit for however long. So as a quick point of clarification on that was something that was discussed. And okay, I don't know if Mr. Reiser may have other things to add to that, but that was something.
Yeah, I guess that to me too is like, it's a bigger, if a smoke detector is beeping in the middle of the night, like starts beeping, like that's not something that's really, and maybe, I'm open to renters telling me I'm totally wrong about this. That's not something that we're going to like go pay an on-call person to do usually in the middle. Just telling you kind of how things work right now. So usually what happens is we kind of tell them to have them on hand in case that happens. Of course, we have houses that they can't change them because the ceilings are big, but I think just kind of to make sure that we're, kind of going over how the real world things work too. Like people tend to change them or take them down because they can't get to them. And so that is a tough, I guess I just want to mention that whole thing, that process wise that happens. So yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the feedback.
But Jen, to answer your question, yes. Currently, it's the owner is responsible for assuring that the detectors and devices are maintained in good operating conditions. And obviously, a smoke detector or carbon monoxide detector without a battery isn't in good condition.
That's fair.
But owners can't go into apartments, so it's up to the tenant to
Right.
So it's up to the tenant to let them know that they need the battery or that it isn't working. I talked to the rental housing, and I'm a little surprised they take smoke detectors on the way out because
They don't take them, they just take them and they disappear. So I don't think they take them, they're beeping one night and they don't.
Okay.
That's why we tell them to have a battery on hand. And I'm curious to hear what you said, John, and I'll take that kind of into consideration. So maybe we
I
do need to
didn't
be
know that.
leaving a
I
couple
thought they-
batteries in units. We'll think about that. But I mean, I think what happens is they start going off at 1 a.m. Somebody needs to sleep. They just take them down, take the battery out, and then they go in a drawer and they just disappear. But I mean, it happens way more than you would think. Even in our like working young professional houses, we see it in all of our housing that they are often misplaced. So yeah, just kind of things to think about. But maybe the better process for us as landlords then is to make sure that we leave a couple batteries for folks.
So there's kind of 4 different kinds of these. You can have a hardwired that AC works right, goes right to your panel, right to your box, and they can't take that. I guess you can take anything, but those are hardwired in. And then there's the kind that have like the 10-year lithium batteries, and then there's the kind that have just other 9-volt batteries. With respect to carbon monoxide, they don't go up high those are in different places, and you can buy those that plug in but have a battery backup.
Right.
Now the problem is, what do you do when you got when you need to plug in a vacuum cleaner, a stereo system, a lava lamp, and whatever else you might need to plug in, and then throw the thing in a drawer and not replug in the carbon monoxide. That's what you really got to worry about is carbon monoxide, because that's the silent killer, man. That's invisible. You're not going to smell it like you might smoke or whatever. But yeah, so that's why I give some thought to what the enforcement should be, whether it's too light, too strict, or whatever. Anyways, I see a lot of hands.
Okay. Was that did everyone respond to Jordan's comments there? Okay. And we will move on to Robert.
Hi. I just wanted to kind of reiterate that clear guidance on where these things need to go would be very, very helpful. Not all, I don't have access to the international code. I suppose I could get access, but that it would just be very, very helpful to know where they should go. Turns out ours were installed by an electrician, and so presumably they meet code. But clarity on that would be real helpful for those who are going to have to install them in the future. Then I have a question. In section 4, 1 and 2 are civil infractions, and section 3 is a misdemeanor. Is there a reason for that? It seems like that's harsh punishment for tossing the carbon monoxide detector in a drawer.
Because people die, and somebody died in a hotel because that happened. Because somebody thwarted a system. It could be a civil infraction.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be, but people die when these things are thwarted intentionally. So it could be a civil infraction. It could be a higher civil. Yeah.
And John,
no, that just makes a lot of sense.
To clarify, though, a lot of this is not the clarification I think is important, and the question is appreciated, but this is very much in line with what we have in place right now for fire detection as well. So it's not as though this is a new standard that is being either more harshly enforced or penalized, however you want to say that, it's in line with what is already code around a similar safety device.
Okay, thank you. I just, from what Jordan says, and I think many others experience, this is common. Just
Thank you, Lucy.
Yeah, I wanted to first just say thanks to Jen. I'm really so uplifted that you took on this story, took the initiative to make this legislation. In my experience working with city councilors on renters issues in the city, things move a lot more slowly. It's really hard to get people to listen. So it's really like I'm just so happy that you're on the city council, and it's really amazing that you've put this together. I wanted to ask a question of process and procedure. So now that I haven't read the legislation until tonight, that when Zachariah shared the screen, it's the first time I've seen it, so I don't have a lot of thoughts about the content immediately. But from here, it seems like it's in a pretty good place. So what are the next steps from here? Is it that it has to be voted on in council, or what's the process for getting it passed is one question. The second thing I wanted to say is just in response to Jordan and Robert, I'm so sorry. It's like looking for you on the screen. The reason why people take down their fire smoke detectors is because they go off randomly all the time. I mean, I've talked to a lot of renters about this. Smoke, who knows what triggers these things, but whatever it is that ends up getting put up, constantly beeping if you put something in the microwave or, this, that, and the other. So that's why people are taking them down and forgetting about it. It's not like they're trying to steal the smoke. It's a very, very common issue. You probably know that as landlords, but it's because they don't function in the way that they're supposed to. They go off all the time.
I can't cook bacon in my house without my smoke detector going off, but that's probably has more to do with me than the smoke detector. I'll let Mr. Reiser elaborate, but one of the purposes in terms of coming here this evening was to collect feedback and input and answer questions and sort of get a gut check. So I think our immediate next step is to take back, especially around the placement question, anything that needs to be clarified and strengthened. Like my goal to bringing this to my colleagues on council is for it to be thoroughly vetted, and that's why I'm here. So, do you have anything to add, John?
The placement, they're where you think they should be, like in bedrooms, in hallways, and maybe we could work with Lisa Wandrash and communications to kind of come up with an ordinance. We did it when we rolled out the sanitation supplies for soap, toilet paper, tampons, pads, when we passed that. So maybe we could do something that we could send to landlords and to tenants that requires where these go. I will say that we have a 2.5 year inspection cycle, and this is something that our rental housing inspectors are going to look for, are going to test. They carry a stick so that they can push the button on the ceiling to test the alarm to see if the batteries are working. So this is something that they're going to check for. Once it goes into effect, they'll just add it to the checklist of mold and windows, locks, and whatever else they look for.
And I think just to give a little bit of clarification on the location, so yeah, they go in bedrooms, but like, for example, in our two biggest houses, they're boilers, and so there's no vents. So we could have 20 bedrooms that they wouldn't be going in. So I guess what I'm saying is that there are so many different configurations that don't, so there's yeah, go ahead, sorry.
You're talking carbon monoxide, right?
Yeah, right. So they wouldn't follow the same pattern as smoke because it's just a different thing. And a lot of us have these different building styles in Ann Arbor. So when I'm saying we need help as landlords, we need if this is your situation, this is where they go, more specific, because all of our buildings are so different. We have some that have forced air, so we put them everywhere. We have some that are boilers, so we wouldn't put them everywhere. Do you get what I'm saying?
I get the nuances on all these.
Thanks.
Right. And if you have a gas fireplace, or if you have let's say you have a new apartment that's all electric, but Yeah, so we'd have to really work with the fire marshal to develop an education piece that incorporates. And we have the 2015 fire code, which isn't the latest fire code, which is the 2018 fire code. So because that's just what the city of Ann Arbor has. So what I would suggest is that if it passes, and I suspect that this will pass in some form, and I think the next step are the Councilmember Cornell and I to say, okay, how do we want to change this based on feedback that we've gotten from this commission and anything from the landlords, if anything, and then how do we want to change it? And then it'll be set for a public hearing and I don't know if it's a first reading and a public hearing or first reading, then a second reading and a public hearing, and then there'll be an effective date after that. But working with the fire marshal to come up with examples like a piece that we could put on the website and a piece we could hand out, I think would be it's a really good suggestion, Robert and Jordan.
Okay. Yeah, I have a few clarifying questions. So I know it was mentioned that there might be a large volume of these detectors that would have to be purchased.
Oh, there will be.
Yes, there will be. But I was thinking about it, and I think that I'm fairly certain that what state law requires is let me think about this. If you renovate a rental unit, don't you need to?
Yep. If you get it a rehab or new construction, yes, yes. So there are a lot of the rental units already have these. So if your point is we don't have to buy that many riser because a lot of them have them already, and that could be true. I just don't know that there's a inventory or a survey out there.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. If there was any data that had been collected about this or any research done about what number of units would potentially be applicable or what would be subject to this.
No.
Okay, that's all right. But it's something to keep in mind that it might not. It's almost certainly not going to be, not even all of the units that have that use natural gas, I guess. Okay. And on that note, I think that in the past, when requirements like this have been instituted, there was a list of trusted vendors that was provided, and so that and by the way, I think my internet connection is a little spotty, so please stop me if you can't understand what I'm saying. But I'm wondering if the same thing could be done for affordable carbon monoxide detectors and ones that are well rated. But I had a quick question for Robert. I know you said you didn't have the international access to the international fire code. Is that I didn't quite understand your point there.
Only that some of these code books are expensive, and not typically available, publicly.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the issue there.
I see. I honestly assumed that it was just free access online. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so that I guess that stresses the point for clarification on the placement, especially if the International Fire Code is being referenced. Right. I think that hits most of my points. The last point I guess I'd like to make is I know that there was some discussion, Councilmember Cornell, I know you mentioned maybe requiring this for all units, period. And I did a lot of thinking about that, some research, and it didn't seem to make sense. And I couldn't find other examples where it was required for every single unit, regardless of a natural gas hookup or appliances or garages or whatever. So I really agree with the scope of this particular amendment. I appreciate you asking and coming here today.
No problem. And I'm glad that you asked for that point of clarification email because it did make me go back to realize when I say all units, I was thinking in my head all applicable units and to be more specific. So that was very helpful.
Of course. Thank you. Okay, Jeff.
I had kind of two thoughts. One of them was I've noticed that the amendment as written doesn't include any kind of um, request or requirement that how tenants are informed that this is now a new policy. Would it be reasonable to add something that just said, tenants must be informed by their landlord that this is a requirement, that this is something that is going to be happening, so that they're aware that this is something they should be expecting, to increase compliance with that if this is something that the council decided to do.
You could, or maybe that it could be done through a resolution. We could put it on our website. There are other groups that work with tenants. We'll have to update our constantly changing runners, the tenants guide. And so this will have to be printed out. Thank you, Zach, for the prop. So it'll have to be printed out and put in that, and that'll need to be amended to incorporate this. So, I mean, that's one way. And so when a new tenant comes in, they get those, and that's on our website, and those are in the clerk's office. So it'll be in there.
Okay. I guess I was more also just to make it so like I've been where I'm at for many years, and I keep up on this stuff. Obviously, that's why I was interested in joining the commission to begin with. But I know a lot of people don't necessarily have the resources or even the knowledge that this is something that they are. These are resources that they might have. So whether it be a mailing or something that might make it more obvious to folks that aren't.
A mailing or an email. There's pros and cons of each way. Notification. That's something that I guess Jen and I can talk about how we want to accomplish that. What's the best way to get it to tenants? And frankly, I want to get it to landlords because they're the one that have to put them in. I want to make sure that those folks know to do it. I mean, as much as I want to get it to tenants.
I felt like it was the other way around. So it's interesting. I think the way that you're phrasing it was interesting because if by inspection and whatnot, they're required to have this, then that removes, I thought of it as removing the burden from a renter to have to ensure that it was there, that we were putting some guardrails around what their expectations were by just making it part of the routine inspection process.
We're going to look for these, Jeffrey. When we get to that dwelling unit, that rental unit, we're going to look for them, and we're for sure going to do outreach to the landlords because they're the ones that need to buy them and install them in the right places. And I'm going to talk to the fire marshal, and probably a good idea, maybe even before it goes forward, Jen, to council to kind of have that attachment as to where they would go, just so the public has a better sense, and as do landlord tenants, everyone does.
Agree. It's good feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. The other question I had was, has there been any kind of research done, or can there be some research done to kind of get a reasonable estimation of the supply availability of these things to make a reasonable deadline so that any landlord that is in good faith actually trying to follow this is not going to be penalized just because they're not available within a 90-day or a 60-day time frame. Is there been any, or is there possible to be any kind of research as to the acquisition of 10,000 or whatever units to make this feasible?
No, unless Mr. Iser's office has done that.
No.
I would suggest that that's probably not the best use of city staff time.
No, we're not going to research it. We're just going to make them do it.
Yeah, and not to be flip about it, but it is something that is readily available, and it is something that there is. It doesn't like the idea of extending in order to put in safety equipment that could save somebody's life doesn't feel like too.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a sweet spot as to what's reasonable, and I guess I defer to Jordan. She's the most knowledgeable, having bought a bunch recently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should. I don't think anyone should tell you anything about a supply chain issue. I mean, you can buy them from Amazon. We found the cheapest prices at Amazon. We try to shop local when we can, but a huge purchase like this, I'm not going to spend $500 extra just to buy them, locally. So, I mean, they're easily available. I don't think we should accept that as like a barrier for why landlords can't do it. I do think that the sheer amount, I think, like I said, looking at the sheer amount that a landlord is having to purchase, their financial burden that they're taking on at the outset is the bigger issue to me than whether or not they can get them. So particularly large landlords, I mean, we assume most of the times that they're, high profit commercial places, but I don't know for sure that that's true. And I don't know if they are operating on a margin that they would come and say, we actually literally can't, this is not in our budget to spend $7,000 right now. I don't know. I hope they have that in reserves, but just kind of throwing out there things for us to think about, to anticipate.
If I may, one last comment on location, and then I'll be quiet about it. We proactively installed them, and the thing about that is, if you do that, they are hardwired, and so the location of our carbon monoxide detectors are not easily movable, and so I don't know, building codes change, and I appreciate that, but that's just another consideration for proactive installations.
Bob, what did you, I'm just curious, what ours are just the plug-in ones with the battery backup, but like, what did you pay per? Because while the hardwired is nice and then you don't have to worry about a battery, if you're talking $60 to $70 and it quadruples the price, we're going to get, then you're talking $24,000 investment, $30,000 investment. So I'm curious as to if you have an idea how much.
Well, it's hard to say. The prices have come down a lot over the past couple of years. I think the actual unit itself was like between $30 and $50, but the labor to hardwire it a bit more.
And because it's rental units, you should know that you can't do the work yourself. You have to contract it out. So you're going to have to get a licensed electrician, pull a permit, get an inspection. That could take some time if suddenly all the electricians are being requested to hardwire these. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's just another factor.
There are some code things that require that. So just to be forewarned, we certainly had all of ours done by a contractor and it was permitted and inspected, but and it wasn't really our option. What wasn't a problem, but under some circumstances that may be required.
Thanks, Robert. Richa?
I'll keep this short. I know we have other things on the agenda as well, but yeah, I think I kind of agree with Jordan's point on just the subject of being clear about who replaces. So I guess when the tenant moves in, like at that stage, the batteries should be installed by the landlord for sure, and just specifying in section 2 who is responsible for the maintenance during the leasing period would just be helpful so that later there's no confusion. A general concern I just have with some ordinances when we mention when they take effect is that we noticed with right to renew that it was, I think, say a month, roughly, or 2 weeks after the ordinance was passed by City Council, it came into effect, but it just wasn't clear which leases it applied to. And so if, say, a tenant has already renewed their lease for the next leasing period, like 23-24, say they renewed in November because of what landlords do in Ann Arbor, which is pressure tenants early, like maybe this will not apply to them. So will they eventually get a carbon monoxide detector in there?
This will apply. Now, the tricky part is going to be that the landlord's going to have to schedule a time for him or her to put it in, or his or her contractor, if they're going to hardwire them or do that. So it's not going to be pertinent to a lease. It's going to be if there's a structure that has a certain type of heat or gas or whatever, then they're going to have to follow this ordinance. So we would expect that on the 91st date or 61st date or whatever the city council ends up implementing, that they're going to be there. Now, if there are complaints because they don't have it and they can't get them or it's scheduled, that's another thing, but it would go into effect on that 91st date or whatever the date is, and they'd have to be there.
Thank you. Dun. Or you're muted.
Is there any standards for the product that is going to be installed? The whatever you could, it doesn't matter. That I could buy it $35, $50, or maybe even $15 cheaper. So as long as could get it, the landlord get it, it could be installed. There any standards for this?
Yeah, it's probably going to have to be like a under UL listed, or there are minimum standards that it's going to have to be.
Yeah, and again, I think that's an important point of clarification, that this is really, we're trying to stay very closely aligned with established precedent around smoke and fire detection, those safety devices, because they've been around and on the books forever. So sort of following that lead felt that's probably a good best practice. But
so it's probably Underwriters Laboratory, UL listed.
UL listed. But this is incredibly helpful feedback, and I know I've taken up way too much of your agenda, but I appreciate it. And I think, John, do you have any other additional clarification or things that you?
No, other than, I don't know if I can share my screen or not. But the City of Ann Arbor Planning and Development Services has a 3-page handout. I don't need to share it, but if you go there, so it's the smoke alarms, where they are, where their location. It's got a schematic of where you put them. So we've done that for smoke alarms. So we can certainly do that for carbon monoxide detectors. Maybe I guess I'll drop it in the chat if I'll able to do that.
I think the big thing for me that came out of this was the one, obviously, some points of clarification, but the communication piece of it, because I always tend to think I bias in that direction given my background in communications. But I do think that, Mr. Iser is saying that, we could work with city staff around that in terms of, leveraging their expertise, which we have an incredible team at the city. To sort of lead that part of this charge, I think is a point well taken and heard here with open arms. So thank you all so much. This was a really thoughtful conversation, and I appreciate you having me here.
Thank you very much for presenting this. We're very appreciative of your work on this issue. I think I certainly read the news of the accident, the carbon monoxide accident. It was very shocking. So I'm glad that there's action. And if any of the commissioners have specific feedback that they think of later, should they reach out to you personally at your city email?
Yes, you may, and I will most likely forward it to John. But please, yes, I would love to see it too. So that's the easy thing. It's jcornell@a2gov.org. So
great. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for being along for the ride. And I hope you all have a really nice rest of your meeting. And I hope it's productive for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
That was a great discussion. Thank you everyone for participating in that. Okay. Let's see, we can move on to our next piece of business, which is 6-B, which is the report we've been talking a lot about on wait lists for rental units in the city of Ann Arbor. So on the agenda, you can also find that document. Now this is just a draft and it is not finished. I'm wondering, would Gail or Richa or Hannah, would any of you like to present this? Just give some updates on what we've changed and give us some background as well for our new members.
I can start a little bit if that's okay.
Thank you.
So the start of the draft is giving a little bit of history about what's been happening with early leasing in Ann Arbor. And historically, landlords were prevented from leasing the units within the first 70 days after a lease has started. So if a lease started on September 1st, a landlord would have to wait till November 10th. Yes, somewhere about there, before they could show the apartment to new tenants or lease the apartment. So in 2021, that was changed. The timeline for that was changed so that landlords have to wait until 150 days before the end of a lease before they can lease the unit or show the apartment. So we gave a little bit of history of that in this document. And then what we were noticing after 2021, when the date of the early leasing ordinance changed, is that landlords were beginning to create waitlist agreements, waitlist fees, and other ways for tenants to hold apartments or an apartment or several apartments that they were interested in while kind of waiting for that 150 days timeline to roll around. And so we try to report on what we've seen, what we've heard about, including holding fees that tenants, prospective tenants can pay for multiple units. It could be a couple $100, it could be $2,000. Some of the fees are refundable, some of the fees aren't refundable, some of the fees convert to a security deposit if a tenant or a group of tenants ends up getting the property if the current tenants aren't going to stay. So we tried to get, we still have more information that we can collect, that we are trying to collect, but we had some, feedback from some of the local landlords. And I think I speak for everybody in our group that, we have some concerns about these fees and how they're impacting and creating another hurdle for tenants to overcome if they want housing for the following year. We're still looking into and working on recommendations, but which is why this is a draft. So any comments or questions we'd appreciate. Zach, Lucy, anybody want to add to that? That'd be great.
Richard, or Hannah, or Lucy, would you like to add anything? Richard? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed or if I repeat something that Gail has already said, but firstly, we've talked about the equity issue here before, that tenants signing like multiple, if there's a case where tenants are getting on multiple wait lists and having to pay for each, this system just favors more well-off tenants over others. So that's for that reason, I think when we discussed it in a smaller group, we felt like a paid waitlist system is it's unacceptable because it puts a lot of low-income tenants at a disadvantage. We talked about just wait lists at all being there. And even that, I think at the last meeting, I wasn't there, but I watched it later. But a commissioner had mentioned that it still puts pressure on tenants to make a decision early. And the whole point of the early leasing ordinance conversation was that fall time period just doesn't work for tenants, and the pressure, we are worried, comes from the landlords and just creates a lot of just stress for current and prospective tenants. We don't know of tenants, like personally, I don't know, maybe others do, of a tenant who really wants to find a unit is like 10 months ahead of time. It's just the fear of just not finding anything else. We've seen discussions on like Reddit and other social media platforms, but the question is more like, if I don't look now, will I get anything next year? And it's not because like they really want something right now, because they just can't wait to, book and like solidify their plans that early, because people simply don't know. I'll just quickly add that we heard from another like specific tenant group in the last month, and that was students who want to move from, say, off-campus housing to fraternity housing. And I think it's in the winter, like early winter months, like Jan Feb is when even they get more clarity on whether they can move. So a group of tenants contacted us saying they were forced to sign leases early, and are stuck now and are very concerned that all they can do is find a subtenant when, despite ELO, etc., existing. So my point here is that the waitlist system is still putting some pressure on tenants. I think when we had the right to renew conversation also, we discussed that we're not adding or removing units from the market. So this whole narrative of like there being some inflationary pressure on prices, like rental rates, etc., also just doesn't make sense to us. But I'll stop here and I'll pass it on to Hannah or Lucy or anyone else who has questions or comments.
Well, I have a few things to add on. Oh, I see, but Lucy, you raised your hand first, so I can pass it on to you. No?
You go.
Okay, thank you. What was I going to mention? Right. So I just want to build off of what you said there, Richa, about the pressure to commit to signing a renewal or actually signing a renewal early on. And I'd like to point out that in the previous years, that pressure for some has actually been applied actually much earlier, like around October or November or December, somewhere around there. It's still happening, but for many people, it is happening a little bit later. Not for everyone. Just need to keep in mind. No, there's a lot of pieces of data in here. You know, some redacted correspondence. There's a few other things that we'd like to include. There's one more correspondence that I'm going to get the permission of a renter, hopefully, to include after redacting it. Regarding application fees and how they are similar in some instances to waitlist fees. But if any of the members of the commission feel that there's something missing, a perspective that's missing, questions that you still have that aren't answered, please mention that during the meeting tonight, or if you notice it later on while reading through it, please send us an email. Send, I suppose, to Kristen, and some of the members of this subgroup. We have like a working group that's writing this report. And that would be very helpful for us to fill in the holes. One other thing I'd like to mention as well here is that Central Student Government at the University of Michigan, they have been conducting a survey. They were planning on closing at the end of December. I requested that they keep it open for a little bit longer because of the somewhat low response rate. They've since doubled the response, the number of responses from like I think around 600, 700 to I think around 1,300, somewhere around there. So they have gotten more responses, and there are questions on there that ask about wait lists. So I'm very excited to see that data, and that might be able to be included in this report. The trajectory for this report, I know that once the subgroup finishes it, we're going to send it on to city staff, and they're going to take a look at it, maybe provide feedback there. And assuming that we want to continue with this project, I think it would then come to the Renters Commission, and we would vote on releasing it, passing it on to the council members. That's all I have right now. If you'd like to get involved in writing the report, you're more than welcome to. You can say that now or send us an email afterward. But I'll pass it on to Lucy.
Yeah, the report is really clarifying. It's nice to see. Though people keep saying my name, I had nothing to do with this. Gail, I think, did all of the work, and it's really, really useful. I was wondering, my question is for Attorney Reiser, Councilmember Radina, Councilmember Harrison, and the city. Does the City Council know about this problem? Are there any ideas that you all have in terms of how to address this issue? Are there any examples from other cities where we can address this? The City Council did pass this legislation. This is a massive loophole, so I'm just wondering, like, what's the solution here? Who's going to step up and try to come up with a way of fixing the problem?
The solution, you mean? Well, Travis has got his hands up.
Wait, Travis?
Thanks. Yeah, I can take a shot at this. And I apologize, everyone. I'm coming down with a cold or something right now. So But I know that we are absolutely aware of this. This is one of the things that we have been hearing about quite consistently from tenants. It's very much been on kind of our radar as hopefully a next step in terms of reforms as we continue to move through some of these renters' rights expansions. And I know that we've started individually looking at potential solutions. We've had conversations, but I know we have wanted to wait for exactly this type of draft and some recommendations to come from the Renters Commission, because we wanted to make sure that we were allowing renters to kind of lead on making some of those recommendations. And so I think this will be really informative to council as well. And I know Gail mentioned potentially getting some recommendations in here before the final draft, and I think those will be helpful in informing what the next steps are as well.
Thank you. Cynthia, we'd like to add on to that. If not, that's totally fine.
Nothing to add at this point, or it was pretty thorough. Thanks, Travis.
Great. So I'll open up the floor for discussion of the report or questions, questions, I think would be great. If not, we can always move on to our next point of business.
I have a question.
Jordan.
And it has to do with wait lists. Do we anticipate what the impact of the right to renew is going to have on wait lists? In other words, if you have a right to renew already, then why do you have to get on a wait list? Because you can renew it automatically without doing the wait list. And I'm just asking that, do we know how that might impact it, Gail? And I know you did a lot of the work on this and others.
Well, it seems to me that the right to renew would apply to students that are, or tenants that are currently living in the unit, but the wait lists are for people who are looking for other housing and trying to get in. So the wait lists the wait list fees and the wait list are being maintained for renters that don't currently live in the property that they want to lease. So, I mean, it's happening now where, you know, a landlord may need to wait until mid-March to find out if the current tenants are going to renew. And so they're for other tenants that have a potential interest in that property, they're requiring wait list deposits, holding fees, whatever. And then, you know, the prospective tenant has to wait to see if the current tenant decides to renew or not. So, you know, I mean, I'm seeing it in the student population. Students are having to expend a lot of money for these, you know, wait lists. There's, you know, there's one landlord that's requiring about $2,000 total. You know, that's a lot of money for a group of students to put down and then have to wait 6 months before they know if they'll get it back. They can't, and they can't change their mind. You know, if they're being told that if they change their mind and say, you know, we don't want to be on the wait list anymore, the landlords are going to keep that money. So it's a lot of money to lose, and it's a big commitment for people. So no, I don't think the right to renew ordinance is changing that.
And then one of the things I always worry about is, what are they going to do next that's not a wait list or not a holding fee, but something else? Like, what's the next, I don't want to say shenanigan, the next artifice that is employed that defeats the intent of this?
Yeah, I think that we are already seeing some of that, I've seen a policy that could maybe be a workaround already, which is that application fees sometimes take the place of waitlist fees. So you may not be explicitly placed on a wait list, but you still are on a list of applications. And the application fees can be quite expensive. $500 is what I saw the other day for an individual tenant. So I think we might have to also think about fees generally, because any kind of fee system could be adapted to potentially be a wait list. it's kind of complicated. And I will also point out that we did find one landlord who was charging almost $10,000 to enter into a waitlist agreement. I think that was intended for a group of 4 or 5 people. So I think that may be what you were referencing, Gail. And first of all, John, do you have any more questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Jordan, was your response to anything that John was saying?
No, mine were, well, more general, but
Okay, then go.
okay. I don't know if it's my internet that's bad or Zachariah's, but hopefully you guys can hear me. Thumbs up. Okay, so I think a couple things are just kind of important to understand about this whole situation as we're making this legislation. So, Richa, our experience is very much different. Like as far as students do want a specific house, because a lot of our stuff is central campus. It's right on Tappan and Hill, and so there a lot of times we want a specific house. The other thing that comes into play here is the size of houses, right? So for those of you who don't really know, and this may be too big, but I'll try to cut it down. A lot of Ann Arbor units mostly are at like 6 people. But there are other ways around that, being that there are multiple units in one house, that they are rooming houses. So if you have a house that can fit 10 people or a unit that can fit 10 people, the demand for it is incredibly high, but you only have a handful of them because they're just not all that common. And so I think, I think about like who I was as an undergrad and a grad student, and there's zero chance I ever would have wanted to live in that type of situation. That's just not who I was. But there is kind of a different level of competitiveness, and that's where this equity discussion comes in, right? Because a lot of these, I heard the highest I've heard is actually 14,000, which was 2,000 a person for a 7-bedroom house. And that money was actually lost, and that was 2 years ago. I will say the stories and the amounts that I heard this year weren't quite as significant as the first year, because I do think that landlords kind of got that we were looking into it and that it was, that people were questioning it. So I do think that it is kind of important to understand that there is that demand. Now, I don't think that those are the voices that we should center in our work, because we're looking for equity. We're looking to do work for people who aren't in that situation. And so I just want to note that it exists, because it's kind of important to understand some of the privilege that comes with these decisions, and why these situations kind of happen, because they can, and because there is that student population that's looking for that. And so I just kind of want to name that. It's not really all that helpful, but I do think that we don't know what's going to come. And I know that John, you always bring up we can't legislate everything, and yes, maybe that's true, but I do think that us continuing to push back on landlords that are doing these things that are unfair and that disproportionately harm the population of students that come from more marginalized communities, from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, like we have to keep fighting for those students. We have to prioritize them in our discussions. Some of them are here with us tonight. So I say them, but some of us that are here on this call. So I just want to keep us reminded that those situations exist, and our focus needs to be on the most disproportionately impacted.
Thank you, Jordan. Nick. Nick?
Hi, sorry about the I'm having some video issues. I've had hopefully it's not jumping around. Thank you for the excellent report on the wait lists and the thoughtful comments. And what I'd like to ask is some of the information that's not in the report. One of the things that troubled me was when I looked at the landlord rationale, none of them were economic. And I'm wondering how much of the wait lists are being returned, what percentage, what amount of income, what kind of economic impact this has on landlords. Is it just a cash cow? Is it something that is, compensating for a financial loss? Because what I'm hearing time and time again, year in and year out, is that vacancy rates are near zero. To me, this can be analogized as charging people to wait in line at a store. This is just, to me, something I have trouble accepting from a policy standpoint, but I also understand the free market and I understand supply and demand. And I'd love to hear from landlords, how much of this money, as we survey all landlords, not just about the amount of the fee, but what percentage of the fees are being kept from people who didn't live there or didn't sign up, and what kind of economic losses or concerns that they have that cause them to charge these fees. I'd love to hear more about that rationale. I'm always open to hearing from the other side, being a tenant advocate myself, because I remember when I was at Student Legal Services, there was a huge problem. In fact, I did a class action lawsuit with international students whose security deposits were being routinely kept by landlords because they knew that they were moving out of the country when they graduated. And so I'm really concerned about these wait lists. And I asked those questions, and I'd love to hear the rationale.
Nick, I mean, I can give you our perspective, which is, we had very little pandemic loss. We did actually give discounts. I think we were the only landlord in town that did when things were shut down. We were able to cover those with our PPP. I think we took a little loss, but so, I mean, I think that, that is notable. There was a tremendous amount of support available. Every tenant that we need that we could hook up with Washington Housing Access and those kind of things, everyone got taken care of. Eventually, it was all a wash for us. So I can speak to us. I mean, our expenses are more, but one thing that I note about this whole scenario is they dropped the lawsuit without any fight. The landlords dropped the lawsuit without any fight. And to me, that says they realized that this was actually going well for them, that with all the fight. And now I can't say that that people have verbalized that to me because, we've been removed from a lot of those spaces. So we don't hear much about that. But I think that's a notable thing for us to kind of just keep in the back of our heads.
Thank you, Jordan. And I just want to add real quick, I've really appreciated our communications during the time I've been on commission. I'm really glad you're on the commission. You have such thoughtful things to add, and thank you so much for that perspective.
Thanks, Nick. You too. And thanks for always listening to those who have. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Dan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, my question might be because I've heard we are talking about everybody was talking different people. So I have questions that, first off, I would say that applications. So I'm just confused when this landlord maybe only have 1 or 2 vacancies, and is there any limits the number that he could charge the students a waitlist fee, or it's just because he only have 2 rooms available and he could just have like 10 people's waitlist fees? That means we should also have to limit the numbers that maybe if he has 2 vacancies, does that mean he only could have 2 waitlist fees could be charged to the students? That could limit the number of students to lose. And then Jordan was saying that the students lost $1,400. And what's the reason for the students to lose $1,400? Because the student gave up, or just because of the landlord that cannot afford?
That's a good question. It was 14,000, so not 1,400. It was 14,000.
Yeah, 14,000.
And
so what is the reason?
Yeah, good. They hadn't gotten the lease, so there was no written agreement, nothing to protect them. The money was just exchanged with a verbal agreement. And when they got the lease, it didn't work at all. The dates were not right. The price for the house was not right. So that's the other thing, is that a lot of these are happening in the absence of any sort of written agreement or accountability at all. And that's a really scary thing, because no other facet of our society would that be okay. Like, we would never exchange $14,000 without some sort of protection for the person handing in the money that was in writing. And so you really have highlighted that point exactly right. You're exactly right.
Thank you. So, and one more question is that when Zach said that there's the policies of $500 application fees. So here comes a number again. So how many applications one landlord or the landlord could accept for his vacancies, or he could just accept forever, as many as he wants? is that fair? So is there any ways to limit them doing the things so that we could prevent the things to happen too much like that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dandan. Those are really good points. You may have noticed I'm coming in and out of the meeting because of my unstable internet connection. I don't know what to do about that. So if I do get kicked out for a little while, Lucy, as the vice chair, you can take over, please. And thank you. Yeah, I also share those concerns about landlords taking mini deposits. Well, application as well, because application fees were almost never refundable, maybe in some instances, but if you don't get accepted, the money's gone generally. Waitlist fees, often I've seen that there's a promise that they will be returned. That promise is not always fulfilled. I've talked directly to tenants who were promised the money back if they weren't offered a unit, if they didn't take the unit, and it was very difficult to get it back. But a lot of them at least have the promise of being returned, but not always. Any other discussion on this report? Comments or questions? Richa.
Yeah, I think we have discussed recommendations. So as a next step, I personally feel like some more legal analysis would actually be helpful. We've done some research. It was really helpful to have Hannah also join and look into some literature out there, or some statutes from other places. But if there's any suggestions around, solidifying those recommendations, because we do have within the commission already, Gail has weighed in, Nick is here. There's a lot of expertise in the group. So I'm wondering how everyone feels, what we need to just make those concrete and send them over, because we have had a discussion and we started to jot down some points. So what's missing?
And adding off of that, or adding on to that rather, in terms of the recommendations, I do want to thank John Reiser for giving some very early explanation of the questions that need to be researched regarding potentially prohibiting or capping fees or regulating wait lists. I know there's more legal work to be done, but I'm appreciative of some of the feedback there. Okay, any other comments before we move on? Wonderful. Well, I'm extremely grateful to everyone who's worked on the report. If you'd like to get involved, we'd love to have you because it's a good amount of work on just a few people. This is obviously just part-time and voluntary. Okay. With that, we will move on to the next point of business, which is 6-C, an update from the Tenant Education Committee, which met, I believe was it 2 weeks ago? That's Tuesday, February 7th. I see. Thank you, Kristen, for writing that down. So would anyone from the Tenant Education Committee meeting, the last one, like to give a little explanation, some report back on what was talked about at that meeting?
I can start, though I joined late, and then I'll pass it on to someone else who's at the meeting. I thought it was a really good meeting, at least the portion that I attended. This was our second meeting where we just focused specifically on looking into materials that already exist and thinking about how we can build on those. Either amplify what's already out there or just create anything new where there are gaps. So broadly, we there's a working folder on Google Drive that everyone in the subcommittee has access to that contains a master document. Yes, so there is this master document over there on the extreme left. Yeah, and this just is a space for everyone to just work on like different parts of just tenant education or tenants' rights materials out there. So, as an example, I just reread the housing code in the last 2 months and highlighted a few points that stood out to me as things that I don't think about on a regular basis, but could be helpful for me to know as a tenant. And it's somewhere in here. So that's just one piece. Another example is the rights and duties booklet that we have, but oftentimes I don't read very thoroughly. So there's space in here for just making notes on various documents that, like the universe of material out there potentially for Ann Arbor tenants. The stuff that Zach, we're looking at right now is this list of, like we created a short list during the meeting, during the last meeting of some pertinent issues that we think tenants, like we could direct tenants' attention towards. So I think we made a list of five to eight topics, such as if there's a maintenance request and we don't hear back early enough from our landlord. So how do you navigate that? What does withholding rent look like? If like when is that merited? How does that work? Also ELO right to renew. When can you get out of your lease? There are some specific cases where you can. How do you find out if your building is not up to code? So we made a list of a few issues that we think could be summarized in some form on, and the purpose of this is to put it on the Renters Commission website or potentially the another like city website where there's like centralized information around tenants, just services for tenants. And as I think we looked at what Gail and I think Nick had worked together to submit to Kristen, and it's already on the website, which is like a table with various organizations and how to reach them for legal support. We thought maybe modeling this like know your rights type like repository on that format where you make a table with various like common issues and what like resources the tenants could access, where there's like how-tos might be helpful. And it seems like my observation is that there is already a lot of work that's been done. For example, when I read the housing code, I saw winterization mentioned in a few places, like what adequate heating should look like and so on. And I noticed later that Gail, I think, has already authored a nice, very informative piece on that. So the good thing is that if we just do a little more digging, we can find something specific to Ann Arbor that's already on the internet, so we don't have to start from scratch. So I think as a next step, we just divided labor a little bit. We know, as I mentioned, like Gail already through Student Legal Services has contributed a lot. So maybe running some of these issues past Gail would be helpful. So because I'm sure there's a lot of insight and feedback on what's there, what can be built, what more can be added. We also discussed reviewing the rights and duties booklet specifically in case there's anything in there that could be useful. I don't think we talked yet about creating new content, but I think we want to be careful to not duplicate efforts or, do something that someone's already done maybe in a better way. So we want to be careful about how much time we all have in general. But yeah, I'll pass it on to others who are at the meeting.
I would like to say that I really appreciated that meeting. I learned a lot, and all the informations you just listed there is extremely helpful, and it's logical. It helps a lot. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Rich. I know you put in a lot of prep work and you made the drive. And Kristen, I know that, I guess, let us know if you have any concerns about that, putting things in a drive. I know that's maybe not, that might not be traditionally how commissions store their data, but we just needed something to put notes in. And it's been very useful, but just let us know. Any discussion, comments, concerns? Yeah, Lucy, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted, so one thing that we talked about too was the tenants' rights and duties handbook. And we talked at the last meeting about the kind of long process it takes to update that. But one thing that we talked about in this meeting was putting a form on our Renters Commission website where people could submit that they didn't get it. That way we can get a sense of who has access to their rights and who doesn't. And I just wanted to see if Kristen had an update about the possibility of that for us.
No update as of right now, but I'm still looking into it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Well, I know, I think we already scheduled our next tenant ed, or wait, yeah, our tenant education committee meeting. I can't remember when that is. Let's take a look in the calendar. Does anyone happen to have that? Yeah, Richa.
I think we just tentatively discussed that we had the last meeting on a Tuesday, so that I think March 7th is a Tuesday around during that.
Yeah, that's right. So if anyone is interested, even if that time doesn't work for you, just email Kristen, please, and then we'll be sure to include you in the future. Great. Okay. Well, then let's move on to our next piece of business, which is, let me see, our plan for March 16th, the next Renters Commission meeting. So I think I'd just like to open the floor here and hear from all of you what you'd like to discuss at our next meeting. Richa.
I wanted to check with Kristen. Do you think we have a good set of questions for the guests who will be joining the meeting from rental housing services? Like, I just put in like several thoughts, but if you think they could be organized a little differently, it's possible that some information need not be addressed at the meeting itself. If someone else, like it might be like a link to a website that I could read later. So everything need not be addressed. But yeah, I just wanted to check in about how that document is looking to you.
I thought it looked like there were some really thoughtful questions in there. I thought it was really helpful where you referenced like specific code questions. So I think that I don't think rental housing should have any issue with their responses for those. And I can tell them when I share the information that if it is something like just sharing where the information is stored, they can provide that in a link. So they don't have to spend time kind of going over it at the meeting, if that time would be better used doing like a back and forth conversation.
I just wanted to clarify, maybe for our newer members, we're having a member of the rental housing services department come to our next commission meeting, and they requested that that we write out the questions in advance so that they can research and have time to answer them or have the answers ready. And today was the last date, I guess there's still time to include questions for rental housing services. So if you do have any questions, there's this document here. And Kristen, do you know if this has been shared with everybody?
I believe it has. I can send it around again this evening. We'll extend that to like the end of the day tomorrow, and I'll send it to rental housing early next week so that they have a good amount of time. You'll still be able to ask them questions also at the meeting, but this just provides them with the opportunity to do some research or maybe do anything to prepare. So it's definitely, your conversation with them is not limited to this. I'll send out the link now.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Thank you for clarifying. Well, I think there will be further discussion of the report, the waitlist report. I'm expecting that we'll make some progress and bring it to a more finished state. So that's one thing that we could have on our next agenda. Another potential, although this is very tentative and I don't think it should be included yet on the next agenda, is it really depends on what happens with the carbon monoxide discussion, but I think we'll have to check in with Councilmember Cornell and John Reiser. And if it looks like it's brought to a more finished state, then we could also maybe write a resolution on our thoughts about that. But I think we'll play that one by ear. Good job.
I was thinking, since we're it's still winter, but kind of like spring is near. If we have to revisit the town hall conversation, if that like does that merit a little like planning subcommittee? Like, for now, I think it's okay to discuss within tenant education, but maybe if we have a few high level ideas to share and get some feedback, that might be good. And then we set some like a date and how we already have notes from our first town hall planning meeting. So maybe we revisit that and check in with everyone because we have new members also. So maybe like town hall can be on the agenda.
Just to clarify, Rich, are you thinking about having a discussion about the town hall at our next Renters Commission meeting?
Yeah, sorry. Little more context. So I think we wanted to do a public, this is a context for everyone else that we were hoping to do a public facing event. Like this was last fall around just where we meet tenants, just hear from them a little bit about their challenges, just experiences living in Ann Arbor and staying in touch, like just generating some awareness that the commission exists and there's avenues to like learn about rights and things like that. So yeah, I think just like resuming thinking about that so that we have some like a potential like town hall in April or May. April is too soon, like maybe May, June, something like that.
Great. Thank you, Rich, for clarifying. Any other ideas about what should be on our next agenda for March? Okay, give it another moment. But otherwise, we will move on. And if you have ideas, you can email them to Kristen, and that will get to I guess the chair and the city council liaisons. We'll consider putting that on there. Wonderful. Let's move on to point 6-E, which is a discussion of the vacancies, the current vacancies on the Renters Commission. And just to preface this, we've had a few vacancies in the past couple months. I've heard from members of the commission that we want to have more applicants so we can more easily recommend to the mayor like a representative pool of potential appointees. And I've also heard that we want to make sure that the commission is staffed fully by commissioners as best we can to distribute the workload and also make sure that we have more voices at the table. So I'll open discussion for anybody who would like to raise your hand. Nick.
Thanks. Hopefully my video doesn't jump. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page about what the process is, which is, as I best can tell, that we all sort of confer and it's like the advise and consent analogy that the Senate has when it's, approving a judge. We don't have veto power. We can't make selections, but we can help the mayor make a decision, or we can pass on names to our council liaisons to help them make a decision. And I don't know if that's just in consultation with our chair, Zachariah, or with the entire commission. So that's what I'd like the discussion to take place around what is the process.
Yeah, if I could just respond. So and the council members can jump in here. I know, Travis, you've explained some of this to me, but I think for the other commissions, usually it's either just the chair or the chair and one or two other members of the commission. So it's a pretty small group. I know we discussed having this commission just rely on the chair and the city council members, but I think that to make that recommendation to the mayor. And you're right that it's the mayor's role. But I think that we came to the conclusion as a commission that we wanted to allow the process to be a little more open and have volunteers to have like a smaller group of, I think, like 4 or 5 people max to take a look at the applications. So we were able to open it up, democratize it a bit, but not make it too large of a discussion, since it should be a somewhat private matter. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that for this commission, and it does vary by commission, there are some commissions where the council liaisons to that commission have the power to make appointments. In most of the cases, it is the mayor who makes appointments, and then council confirms those appointments. Because we want to make sure that we are hearing from the commissions with which these individuals will work. In almost all of the cases, in all of the commissions that I work with, we also consult with some subset of the commission in reviewing the applications before making those recommendations. And so in some places, it's the chair and the vice chair. In some places, it's just the chair. With this group, it's a smaller committee. And so that varies by commission, but ultimately it is a recommendation, and the mayor often uses those. They heavily kind of will help to influence his decision, but ultimately in this case it is his decision to look at the applications and to make an appointment. It is, I would say, rare that he would appoint someone that is actively opposed by a commission. I don't know that has happened in my time on council, but it is ultimately within his authority to make appointments and for council to confirm.
Thank you very much, Travis. Does that answer your question, Nick?
I feel a lot more edified. Thank you so much.
Great. Hannah.
Yeah, this is just a small comment about to get more applications, but I think the town hall would be a good place for that, and especially like to access maybe different representative voices than the ones that the regular channels would. I am also just, this might already be true, I'm just not on my social media that much, but like as much as the city of Ann Arbor and our council people can push out the openings, I know the city of Ann Arbor itself has a lot of followers, but Kristen, I don't know if that's like a process or maybe they already do it, but when I used to work in local government, we always included it in our newsletters, any openings on commissions, and Twitter as well.
I see Travis's hand went up right when you said that, so go ahead.
Yeah, so there are certainly opportunities for the city to promote vacancies, and I would say that the city as a whole probably does it more broadly at certain times of the year, because there are periods where a lot of vacancies occur because terms are up. In this case, we have a couple of vacancies because of early resignations. Some of our commissions, and I don't know, Kristen, this is maybe where you can help. I don't know that our list has grown that substantially yet. A lot of commissions, because they've been in existence for a number of years, have much larger listservs that follow the work of those commissions. And so it's easier to send out a message to the folks who are following the work of that commission to solicit applications. And then I know that, I personally will push out a message every once in a while saying that we have vacancies and trying to push people. But I know that particularly if we are looking for, and this is important to me, particularly if we are looking to make sure that we have kind of diverse perspectives on our bodies, I think we need to work really actively to reach out to those communities and not just expect them to find us, because often the most marginalized or the most challenged renters in our community may not necessarily always be the ones who are interfacing with their government or their elected officials regularly. So I know that Cynthia and I are actively doing some outreach right now into some of those communities to try to get people and invite people to the table.
Thank you. Jamie.
Yeah, related to what Travis was just saying, sorry, I have a cold too. So I'm a little froggy sounding, but so So in terms of community outreach, and I think this came up a little bit in our education meeting, like as the Renters Commission, is community outreach something that falls under our umbrella, or is that more like on council members to do community outreach and extend and like inform people about the Renters Commission? I don't know who that's a question for exactly.
For this, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kristen. I was just going to refer them to the bylaws, Article 3, your purpose, objectives, and duties, 3.1, and there are A through H that kind of talks about what you folks are about and what you're doing. Monitor and evaluate trends, propose, evaluate, recommend, respond to policies, practice, or laws that impact renters. Monitor the enforcement, solicit inputs from stakeholders such as land, communicate regularly, and work with other city boards and commissions and staff. Consult with the city attorney's office. Consult the city general housing unit. Thanks. And then are you guys down 3 folks? Because you've got like 16, right? 11 voting, 5 non-voting, and I counted 13, not counting you and me.
The website says two vacancies. I don't know if Kristen can co-sign if that's.
I can double check. I think it's 2. I think we're down an HHSAB liaison also right now. That position is non-voting. I'll add to what John said. For this purpose, for recruiting people to apply, you can certainly share this opportunity with people in your network to refer them to the city's website to fill out an application is totally fine and appropriate. That you definitely do that. Was that the whole question?
Yeah, pretty much. I was just thinking in terms of like connecting with, maybe somebody that's not in my immediate network to try and expand applicants to different communities, like just in terms of even saying, going into a neighborhood and with the Renters Commission, we have our meetings, even just like making the meetings more like not even to the extent of like, do you have any, are you a tenant? Do you have any issues? But like, this is when our meetings occur. You can come to us with public comment, like just general like information about the commission. Is that something that's in terms of like getting the word out?
I think it's definitely something worth exploring. I'm picturing that as kind of like maybe like a flyer on a mailroom bulletin board kind of thing. I don't know about like a door-to-door situation, but I think that I can look into it and ask. I think that with the purpose of reaching some folks who maybe aren't plugged in at 9:26 p.m. To our meetings, I think is worth looking into. Good question.
Thank you.
And if folks have ideas, I'll also just add, like, feel free to share them, even if you don't have the time or if you're introverted or whatever it is, and you don't want to do that outreach to somebody you might not know. I think, Cynthia and I are happy to do some of that. I know I have an upcoming meeting with the Bryant Community Center, and I'm going to chat with them about, if there's anyone within their network that this might be a good opportunity for, and ask them to make recommendations to us as well.
That's actually my suggestion. Check in with Bryant, Arrowwood, High Cone, all of those people know good folks in their network. That was all my hand was up for too.
Really good suggestions. Thanks. I see the next on the list is Richa.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question for council members or Kristen. I think it would be really helpful if we have like a very specific blurb, because I know of organizations who would put it in their newsletters, like they send out bi-weekly, monthly newsletters. And the more specific we can be, the better we can target our outreach, because we have a general like vacancy notification on the website, and we have gotten applications. It's like applications are coming in. So I think if it's a matter of better targeting, we need to like write that out, and then I can send it to organizations. I had another thought. Yeah, I think I liked Jamie's idea of just getting the word out. I think there was a Mayor's Green Fair where there was a Renters Commission's table, and Zach, Hannah, Kristen were there and talked to tenants and did that awareness thing. I think in a couple of tenant outreach events that I have done on behalf of other groups, we've talked about the Renters Commission and encouraged people to apply. And I have another event coming up next week where we'll be talking to some tenants, and I will again ask people to apply. So that's something we do. Yeah, I'll pause. I see others have raised their hands, and I'll come back if we have time for more.
Thanks, Rachel. Jeff.
Hi. I'm wondering if, having being new here and not knowing everybody yet, if there's like a particular area of the city or a ward that might be underrepresented here as well that might be worth specifically targeting.
I am going to ask Travis. Do you know if Go ahead.
We can pull. So when folks fill out their applications, they do mark, or it does tell us which ward they're in, and so we could actually pull to see if there's a geographic region of the ward. I know Cynthia and I in our conversations are really focused on some of the perspectives that are missing from this body. I know, for example, both of the recent resignations were our Black commissioners. And so making sure that we have some racial diversity on the commission, making sure that we have some folks who might have experienced homelessness, because one of the folks that we lost was somebody who had experience working with homeless populations. And so there are some marginal populations that are not currently represented at the table. And I think that's where our focus has been.
Go ahead, Lucy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to say a few things, which is that I had done some outreach to people, and a few of them said that they had already applied. So I don't know if they're in the first round. So I don't know if those applications, if I should ask them to resubmit them, or what the deal is there, but they weren't in the list of applications that were sent to us as the ones that we have gotten, and that was about 3 people. The other thing is that I asked a handful, and I just think people should know this, I asked a handful of tenant organizers that I know if they would be interested in applying for the commission, and they said no, because they haven't seen the city of Ann Arbor take seriously tenants' rights issues, and so they would prefer to keep doing their tenant organizing. So I've stopped asking tenants organizers, because I can in good conscience ask them to come to this commission.
Thank you, Lucy. Cynthia, I saw your hand up before mine, actually. I don't know how I ended up in front of you, so I'll let you go ahead.
Can I just pop in to say I have to leave, so I'm sorry. I don't want to talk about that.
No worries.
Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much, Gail. I appreciate your presence. Yep.
I just kind of wanted to jump in here. I had seen the emails regarding the openings, and I didn't get a chance to kind of weigh in. And so I want to just piggyback. I've been speaking with Travis this week. And as I was kind of preparing for this meeting, I was actually looking over something that occurred yesterday that I'm really excited about. The Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners actually passed a resolution to establish Washtenaw County Advisory Council on Reparations for the purpose of studying and developing reparation proposals for Black Washtenaw County residents. And I just kind of wanted to share the whereas clause as it pertains to, how Black people are basically disproportionately affected when it comes to housing. So I'm going to read a few of the whereas clauses. Whereas Black people have disproportionately been forced to reside in, adjacent to, or near toxic sites that negatively impact their health and property, and whereas Black people have been denied housing through racist practices in the private realty market, including redlining, steering, blockbusting, denial of mortgages, racially restricted covenants, and gentrification. And whereas Black people have disproportionately experienced substandard housing by government housing policies that include discriminatory VA, FHA practices, urban renewal, and a variety of local and federal affordable housing programs that concentrate poverty. And I'm going to jump up to a different whereas clause because in addition to the importance of having somebody Black on this commission, it is, to me, very important that we also have somebody that's been impacted by the criminal legal system. Those individuals, when we were discussing the wait list earlier, circling back to that before I read this last whereas clause, the folks that are really largely being hurt by these wait list fees and these predatory practices that landlords are practicing right now, oftentimes largely is the Black community. They're applying more often and being denied. Therefore, they're paying more in fees, oftentimes in these wait list fees. So, I work in these spaces. I'm a reentry manager for the organization. We work with returning citizens for the organization that I work for. So I'm in these spaces a lot. I hear what's happening, and it's Black and brown marginalized people of color and folks that live with who have been impacted by the criminal legal system that largely are really suffering when it comes to housing here in Washtenaw County. The last whereas clause I'm going to read is that Black people have been unjustly targeted by law enforcement and criminal justice procedures, incarcerated at disproportionate rates, and subsequently excluded from full participation in the benefits of citizenship that include voting, employment, housing, and healthcare. So that's just what I wanted to add tonight. I'm sorry I didn't get to weigh in earlier in the email that were going back and forth, but I figured I'd save it till this evening. So that's all I have for now.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. I think those points are definitely received here. And they're also somewhat reflected in the report because we're trying to reference exactly the facts that you're mentioning there. I know that there are frustrations about how much work is falling upon the commissioners we currently have, and I know that there are some really good applicants who have applied. But I'm also hearing what you've said, Cynthia. I know Travis, you've mentioned as well about trying to get diversity. So I think that trying to increase the number of applications needs to happen. I know that we had discussed this, I believe, in December, and I don't know if it's Travis. You mentioned that you were going to ask the other city council members to include that in their newsletters, the application, and I was wondering if that had occurred, if that they had done that.
I have mentioned it to them as I've talked to them, but I don't know if they've all included it yet, but I can follow back up with them again. Okay, and if there's anything we can do to help with that, if you'd like us to write out a request, someone on the commission, I think that we'd be more than happy to do that. So let us know how we can help. I think that would help. I think that some of the other suggestions would also help. When it comes to people who've experienced homelessness, I think it's a really good idea to try to get applicants from that community. The friends that I have who have experienced homelessness, I don't think, unfortunately, would be interested in serving on the commission because of their experiences with government generally. So that's going to be difficult. Just putting from my personal experience out there. I will certainly, and to add on to that, I know that there was also some discussion about graphics, and thank you for bringing that up about a blurb, Richa. I think a description would be really, really helpful. But that's all from me. Thank you. Richa.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask again, point out that we have 2 vacancies, and that puts a lot of the work on a few commissioners. And that is, for example, we got a really good memo from the city about enforcement and we are not going to get to it until 5 weeks from now because we are on multiple subcommittees. And we have meetings coming. We have a tenant ed meeting next, like in a few weeks, and we do not want to neglect that for enforcement. But these are all urgent issues. So I want to hear from like others on the commission about how we navigate this when there's so many urgent tenant issues and we're not fully staffed. And I completely agree with what Zachariah, like I've had a similar experience, and we do go to tenants where they are. We do. And I am in multiple tenant rights groups, which include marginalized tenants, and they organize in other ways. Lucy's also mentioned in the email. So while I'm happy to, like, again, the blurb would be really helpful, can continue outreach. And because I'm already engaged, we talked about separately, I can also step down and have more people. So there's more vacancies later, but we don't have, like, we have applications, we have vacancies, and we're not filling them. But yeah, if my proposal, that's why in a separate email thread, was to fill the seats. And as we continue to ramp up outreach and more applications come in, I don't think applications or interest needs to only come in when vacancies happen. A pipeline is great, so that as and when a commissioner feels like, they're feeling a little overwhelmed with work, we know that, hey, we actually have some really good applicants. Someone can step down and others can take on. Like I can easily step down by May, June, and use like public comments and other spaces to engage with the Renters Commission. So just wanted to say that that's the intention here, to fill seats, and then, those of us who have other ways of engaging can step down, and then like as more applications come in.
So Richard, just to clarify what you're saying, that you're proposing that you would step down so that we could start filling some of the seats, but still leave some open for the kinds of applicants
I would say that we fill seats but when we have applicants right now, and while we do outreach, because the outreach process is a longer term process. And if the concern is that with the full commission, there's not going to be room for more diversity, there's room for, like, I know for myself to continue to engage with the Renters Commission in other capacities rather than being here, like I can step aside and have the spots taken. So I would say, like, I'd rather see a full commission at all times, is my point.
I see. Thank you for clarifying. I hope you don't step down. I really appreciate your presence and your work here. Lucy.
Yeah, I was going to say many of the same things Richard said. I will also gladly step down if a full commission comes together. Meanwhile, some of us are doing a lot of work. Meanwhile, some of us have done a lot of outreach, and people have expressed to us this is not the space that they would like to do their tenant organizing work. There are many community organizations which are doing incredible tenant organizing work. The Renters Commission has just started, and we have not so far done very inspiring work. And it's hard to get a commission off the ground. So that's just part of it. But meanwhile, some of us are doing a lot of work. And I would say, Commissioner Harrison, I would really appreciate you reaching out to us individually. I really appreciated what you said. You're new to the commission. There's much more background that we could give you. Some of us have been doing tenants' rights work in the city for a while. And there's just a lot to know, but we're really tired. We're really overworked. It's a working class commission. So I'm fully in support of making our city commissions more diverse. For example, I would really love a renter or a low income tenant on the planning commission, where people do development work. I mean, we need working class voices all across the city. This is a primarily working class commission. So, we're tired. We don't have a lot of money. We're doing free labor for the city, and there are vacant seats. We need to fill them.
Okay, Rich. Richard, did you put your hand back up? No. Okay, Nick.
Yes. Boy, there's so much I want to say. First of all, I wanted to thank Councilmember Harrison for her advocacy and her presence on the commission. Re-entry for the incarcerated, or those who have contact with the criminal justice system, trying to get security deposits, pass economic checks, etc., is a nearly insurmountable thing. And sometimes we focus a lot on student renters, and we have to remember that is a percentage of the folks that we're trying to help. We also, of course, have to remember that landlords are big and small landlords, depend on rental income for a living, and that even as a tenant advocate, I get that. I mean, you're trying to put food on the table for your people too. But as far as what you need to bring to the table to be an effective commissioner, what we're seeing is you need the support. You need, maybe you're connected with an organization and that's why you've been selected to the commission. Maybe you have support from your organization so that you can do your research and study and bring preparation to the meeting. And that's not easy for a lot of people, no matter what your walk of life is, no matter what position you're in. And it does make it a challenge to try to recruit people when the people we most want to serve have the limitations that make it most difficult for them to have their voices heard. So it's not an easy process. The outreach things we're talking about, I think, are really important. And, and my original question when we opened this topic is making sure that we all can be heard, even though we're not the decision makers about who's being chosen, but to make sure all these voices can be heard about who is selected to the commission.
I just want to echo that, Nick. I think you put it very well, that expressing the challenge and trying to get people who are more disadvantaged in the rental market to serve in the commission, because they're the ones who are least able to do that. Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask both of our council members, how can we help as commissioners in informing potential applicants, especially the ones from the backgrounds that you mentioned, that there are 2 vacancies and how to apply. How can we help, I guess, besides the ways that were mentioned, which is, reaching out in our own circles, because I'm not sure that our own circles are going to find the applicants that are needed.
I mean, even if you have ideas outside of your own circles, like I said before, we're happy to do some of that groundwork. I know that Councilmember Harrison has been in contact with A Brighter Way, where she is, I believe, also a board member. I actually just heard back today from the Housing Commission that they have shared the information with 3 of their residents that they think would be strong applicants. And as I mentioned, I'm reaching out to Bryant Center in the next couple of days in a meeting that I have about some other topics with them. And so we're doing that outreach. And so if there are other ideas that maybe we're not thinking of, we are happy to put in the work of reaching out to those community organizations or leaders. So just let us know.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, are we going to is there a date by which we want to recommence this discussion automatically, or are we just going to wait until oh my gosh, what's going on with Nick? Oh dear. I hope you're all right, Nick.
Travis was nice enough to text me to let me know that my video screen was going crazy.
It's like a horror movie.
That's why I keep cutting out on the video.
Okay. And again, this is a question I think specifically to the council members. Is there, do we want to revisit this in a month, or do we want to just play, how ideally would we proceed in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, I think this should be a standing conversation. So if there are vacancies, we should be talking about them. And so I don't think that's a concern at all. I think we should absolutely revisit. We can give you an update at the next meeting if our group hasn't already met and made recommendations. So I think that absolutely just kind of keep it going. And I agree with Richa that we should absolutely be developing a pipeline. And that's part of why we're wanting to establish some of the relationships with some of these organizations that can help to continue to build that pipeline for us of applicants.
Okay, thank you. I'll move it on to Hannah.
Oh, I kind of forgot my hand was still up because I don't think I have anything new to say, but
thank you, Councilmember Harrison, and then also Councilmember Radina, for the information and the thoughts that you shared. I was gonna just ask what Zachariah said about like how we can help. I feel like I've been talking about this with like close friends. Like I feel very aware that I'm like a white graduate student on this commission, where I think like there's like great advocacy around students already, and so I like very aware that like I don't know like what if my voice is needed here. And then that being said, like I want to help push the word out to my people are law students who like sure some of them need help, but I'm not worried about them finding housing in a crisis. I think they are people who know where to go when something happens. And so I would just like to help with that too. The only thing I'm really thinking of is our law school clinics, because those people are like pretty long-term community members. I also know that Nick knows those people a lot better than me. So maybe I'll just reach out to him over email and see if I can connect with these clinics about like their former clients, the ones who work with housing people in particular, because I'm sure current clients probably wouldn't have the capacity, but maybe former clients and people they work with would. But that's my only idea. If other people have law school adjacent ideas, I'd love to hear them.
I look forward to hearing from you on that, Hannah.
Awesome. That's a terrific idea. I saw Lucy, did you had your hand up?
No, forget it.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on this discussion point? Richa.
Yeah, I think this was helpful just to have on the agenda because some good ideas have come in. But I will again say that we're understaffed, and that's very difficult. As I said, like we're postponing an enforcement meeting that could have happened much sooner. It could have happened the second week of March, but we're not doing it because most of us on the enforcement committee are in the tenant ed committee, and so work slows down. And the waitlist report has also taken months because all of us in the waitlist committee are in enforcement committees and tenant ed. So there's a lot of work that very few people are doing. And that will continue for another month at least. That's all.
Thank you. Cynthia, I saw your hand up.
I know it's getting late and I don't want to, I know it's late. Can I just ask, I'm new, I'm still learning. Can I ask a little bit about the committees and how, how many folks are on what committees, or like, do you mind just kind of?
Of course.
I hear all this work that, I'm just kind of curious about. I know I serve as a liaison on ICPOC, and we limit the number of committees that our commissioners can be on. It's a lot of work. So can someone like share with me a little bit about?
Of course. And I think that, well, maybe we have something to learn. I think we do have something to learn from you and your experience on ICPOC, because most of the people here, I don't think, have served on commissions, and we just created these committees because we thought that they were needed, and we didn't limit membership, for example. But I think that if we did, we would probably not be able to do so many. So we have I'm not actually sure if it's officially a committee, but we have a group working on the waitlist report. We also have we have a tenant education committee. We have a committee that's talking about, it's discussing the enforcement policy for right to renew and early leasing ordinance. That's 3. And then we have kind of an ad hoc committee to make the recommendations to the mayor for appointments. Am I missing anything there? Did I get all of them? Travis.
Sorry, this is not an addendum to what you're saying. I think you did get all of them. I was also just going to say, I think this is an opportunity where, and this may not be a solution right this moment, because we are talking about the need to find additional people to come into the work. But the working groups, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, but that is also an opportunity where we can pull in individuals in the community who may not serve as full commissioners on this body, but who want to participate in some of the work of the commission and have their voices heard. And I believe as long as, a single commissioner is leading one of those, we could have those more open to the public. I think that's the way that they've been done on the Energy Commission, for example, at times where they might open it up to some expertise or some tenants advocates who have some input and expertise in an area, and then the commissioner who is kind of leading that group can report back to the body as a whole.
That is my understanding, as long as there's at least one voting member.
That's really good to know. Thank you for pointing that out, Travis. Maybe in this way, we could open up some of the working groups to, especially to the people who have applied to the commission, who seem like they would be really great workers and provide a lot of value, without actually having them as full commissioners. That might be a way to help with some of the frustrations that I've been hearing, and also ensure that the full commissioner seats are open for applicants that come from marginalized backgrounds. Okay. And I'll move on to Jeff.
Thank you. Obviously, as this is my first meeting, I'm just trying to. There's a lot, and I'm glad. And I guess my question for me personally would be, there's these 4 or so committees. Is there one in particular that this group feels needs the most help? Is there like a group that really is understaffed at the moment?
Any thoughts, anybody? Perhaps the waitlist reports.
Excuse me. I ask because I'm new. I want to be involved. I want to be involved in a place where I can do the most, provide the most assistance too. So that's what I'm kind of asking.
And I would also say, like, if there is an area that you are most interested in, like, volunteer that, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like Richa is currently serving on almost all of them. And so I think, the work is needed everywhere. And so if there's an area where you are most interested, it might free her or someone else up to be able to step back and really focus on one of the other areas.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. And I think that the waitlist report probably should, since it might influence policies that are a bit time sensitive, that might be a good idea. If you have any writing experience or just want to be involved, that would be wonderful. Okay, it is getting late, so I think we should continue on through the agenda. Does anyone have, but I'll open it up one last time. Does anyone have any other comments on that issue? And we will move on to reports. So we're going to go through a number of reports here. If you don't have anything to add that you haven't said already, then we can just continue through, and that's totally fine. So I guess we'll start with 7-A, report from City Council.
I'm looking at Cynthia to see if she wanted to go. The only thing that I would add beyond what we've already said is just to draw attention in the communication section of the agenda to the memo from city administration about enforcement and the implementation of the right to renew and early leasing ordinance. So I just want to make sure that everybody has visibility on that. I think that's probably the only update I'll add right now.
Okay. Great. Cynthia? Yeah.
No other updates. Thanks.
That's fine. Thank you. 7-B, report from HHSAB liaison. We don't have one at the moment. Thank you, Travis. I think you have been emailing. Thanks. Try to get one.
I actually tried to get an update on that today. I spoke with Councilmember Watson. They are also currently suffering with the makeup of their body right now. I think they did not have quorum at their last meeting, and so they are working to try to get the group to be a little bit more active. But I think there's been a struggle in getting somebody to commit to, 2 volunteer meetings a month. I think we took for granted the value it was of having me be liaison to both of them, where I could kind of fill that role when we lost our liaison. But it is something that they are aware of. And so in the meantime, I think, Councilmember Watson and I, or Councilmember Song, or whomever, we can just continue kind of liaising amongst the council members and try to provide that in council updates until we get that position filled.
Thank you, Travis. Is that a verb, liaise? Don't answer that. Let's keep going. Okay. 7-D, reports from commissioners. I'll open it up to any commissioners who'd like to give a brief report. Jordan.
I have the super briefest thing, but just to make a note that U of M did vote today to change the calendar. So graduation is actually being pushed back a weekend. I'm trying to do some advocacy in the U of M parent groups just to kind of point out to parents that it would be good to have students, kind of give it a week and see if their landlord reaches out to change anything for the May leases. And we will probably proactively reach out to our tenants, but just kind of something to be aware of if you are working in tenant spaces. That's a pretty significant change. And given that May leases are already signed in December, there's a good portion of those that may be affected.
Thank you, Jordan. I'll keep this brief as well. There's a situation that we've been noticing where tenants are being offered different rates, different rental rates for the next leasing cycle based on when they sign their lease. I know that there's some discussion among lawyers about how tenants should navigate this. If you hear from a renter who's experiencing this kind of tiered renting system where the longer you wait, the more expensive it becomes for the next year, please direct them to Gail Rosen or Nick Rumel, who's on here. I know that they'd like to talk with them. Besides that, I know that there's some outreach occurring from tenants advocates in Ann Arbor and from other parts of the state to the new state legislature. That there's some exciting discussions occurring regarding a lot of different issues, but I'm not going to get into them now. I guess you can let me know or let Richard know if you'd like to if you're interested in being involved in those conversations. That's it for me. Richard.
I wanted to bring up this as part of the tenant education thing, but could be a separate piece. We have received at least like 12 unique complaints, let's say 10, 2 are from landlords, about tenant issues. And maybe the city staff has responded to them, but I don't know if as a commission we have spent enough time looking at those. Most recently, I think it's attached to this agenda is the laundry fee issue. And I know tonight we're not going to get time to talk about it, but I think as a group can spend some time on it, maybe asynchronously. So I have created a spreadsheet which has a log of all the communication that we have access to. There's like 13 rows right now, but that will grow. So I've left a column that just says commissioner's response. I think it would be great for us to at least brainstorm something. It might help from a research standpoint, even for us to learn more about what protections tenants have that we already may not be aware of. So there's that piece. This is entirely like renters commission focused. So I just wanted to ask, maybe over an email or in our next tenant ed meeting, we can talk about how we start making sure we're addressing each of them one way or the other. I don't know right now if we can directly talk to tenants. I think my understanding is that we cannot. We should at least have some thoughts on this that we can put down. I think that's good for future commissioners also, so that if they hear from tenants facing similar issues, they can look at our log and pull information from there. So people don't, have to reinvent the wheel. We also had, this is from Geo Housing. We received an issue about utility bills. A tenant has been charged upwards of like $300 for like 2 months or so now for utilities, and they're not able to figure out what's going on. They've talked to DT, they talked to their landlords, and they're just going in circles. So now I'm just saying that these issues exist, and we, as in other smaller tenant organizing groups, don't have the capacity necessarily to address those in a time-bound manner, and so tenants are struggling. There are lots of challenges. I think there's a role for the commission there. I just don't know. I think I'd leave it up. Maybe we can revisit this in a next meeting. But yeah, there's a lot of tenant issues out there just that are unaddressed.
Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else? Okay.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna, it's just I've gotten more stuff about the increasing rent prices, like Zachariah said, mostly at the yard, and I've directed them to Nick and Gail.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I think that will be helpful. Okay, anyone else? Any other commissioners would like to give a report? Travis.
I'm sorry. The only other thing that I realized was relevant to this group, and I'm sure you may have all seen the news, but that could be something that's impactful in the rental market, is the news that the university is planning to build some additional student housing. Obviously, that's not going to be immediate, but it is something that might impact the market soon. Obviously, there's a bit of questions around how that's all going to come into effect, but I think we have the shared goal of wanting to increase the housing supply, and so it's something to note as well for those who are following.
Yeah, I believe they asked Ron Weiser for help in procuring those properties, which is okay. Anything else? Great. If you have any updates, you can always send them to Kristen to send it to the rest of the commission, and you can talk to with individual commissioners. That's totally fine, as long as you don't break the Open Meetings Act, which, if you don't know what that is, I think it'd be a good idea to send that document out to everybody. Okay, wonderful. So now we move on to point 8, which is their second general public comment session. Kristen, would you like to lead this, or shall I?
I could do it. That's fine.
Thank you.
Public comment can be made by phone by calling 877-853-5247 and entering meeting ID 935-8080-1941, or through the Zoom web link that is a2gov.org/renters commission meetings. Attendees who have called should press *9 to raise their hand to be called on. Attendees who are joining through the Zoom web link should use the raise hand feature to be called on. And then you can state your name at the beginning of your comment and address the Renters Commission for up to 3 minutes. So if there is anyone who would like to address the Renters Commission, please press *9 or use the raise hand feature now. We do have one attendee, and then we'll just hold on for just a moment in case anyone is joining. Right now, attendees have indicated, so we can close public comment.
I didn't hear that, Kristen. Did you say that you were closing public comment?
Yeah, sorry about that. No call.
That's
no.
all right.
There have been no attendees who have indicated.
Thank you very much. With that, we can move to point 9, which is communication. We've had, I believe, we have 3 attachments here. I know Kristen sent out the last one briefly before the meeting. Our first one, I have to open this up, sorry. Guys, oh, I guess we have 4 now. Okay. Oh no, I think we only do have 3, I believe. So the first one is a communication from a tenant to the Ann Arbor Renters Commission regarding, I think, washing and drying machines. So washers and dryers. They were promised a washer and dryer, it's my understanding, but then the machine broke down and they asked for a refund, but the landlord said that they were not able to do that. I'll open the floor for discussion on this. It's all right if there is none, but this is a question to Richa. Has GEO's Housing Caucus been in touch with this individual?
No, there's been no information that we've received from them. Do they have our contact info? I don't have theirs. So no.
I know that the commission does, but I'm not so sure we would be allowed to pass that on to Geo's Housing Caucus. My understanding, so I think Kristen responded with a bunch of, with the list of resources there. Okay. That's something to put on our radar to maybe think about this particular situation. And we can move on to the next communication, which is the memorandum regarding enforcement processes for right to renew in the early leasing ordinance. This is, I'm very glad that this has been released by the city administrator. Thank you to Travis and Cynthia for speaking with the city administrator and communicating that we wanted some clarity about what the city's policy is on enforcing these, both the existing law and the right to renew, which is technically also existing but will be applicable to future contracts. I think that in the interest of time, we should all read through this on our own, and this should be a discussion point for the next meeting.
And just to add some context, I think Attorney Reiser had a hand in drafting this. So if we have questions, I imagine that he might be available at our next meeting to help answer them too. So perhaps if you have them, maybe get them in advance to Kristen and
or call me.
But if we submit them to Kristen, then the entire body can benefit from the questions as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you, John. Okay. And then the last. I see. Yeah, the last communication, which I haven't read yet, actually, is a communication from, it appears, the Washington Area Apartment Association regarding the carbon monoxide detector, the proposed amendment to the housing code to include the requirement for all, the applicable rental units to have a carbon monoxide detector. So it looks like they're providing the perspective of the Washington Area Apartment Association. So I think this is also important to read, to add on to what Jordan and Robert were able to.
Yeah, and I received this. Well, actually, I think all of council received this from the president of the Washington Area Apartment Association. I don't know. I don't remember if he says in it that he's speaking on behalf of the association. I think he may be speaking as an individual and who happens to be president of the apartment association. I don't know if they've signed off on the entire thing, but it is. He provides some perspective and concerns on the carbon monoxide detector ordinance.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that you're right from just a quick glance. Any comments, questions, communication? I think we can also discuss this over. Oh, hello.
I think everything will be addressed in our, figuring out of like where they go. I feel like we've addressed most of this. I mean, in some ways, some of this was the stuff that I shared. In some ways, it's said a little bit differently, but I think before we have the specifics of where they need to go figured out with both of the entities, late brain not working, rental housing people who are doing the inspections and the fire. Those are the two things that we need to just make sure everyone's on the same page. The person who's going to be citing people needs to be on the same page with the fire people, and we all need to be informed as landlords. Like that's just, I feel like we've addressed most of this in our prior coverage personally.
So I've already emailed fire and rental housing about putting together a summary of where the things go, like we have already for carbon monoxide detectors. It will also help their rental housing inspectors know what to look for. So education internally, externally has to be done. It's a good point. We're going to get that done.
Great. Thank you very much. That's, I believe, the last of our communications. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, if there was an addition that I didn't include there. But otherwise, we will move on to the next point of business, which is adjournment, number 10. So, would anyone like to motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion
Is
by
that
Nick,
today's motion?
seconded by Jamie. Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning to a long meeting, say yay.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Okay, so unanimously, we vote to adjourn.
Good night,
Thank you
everybody.
very much for the long meeting.